in chemistry, it is a very important topic which is called chemical kinetics and equilibriums. In chemical kinetics, the word kinetics means motion. It is something that is moving from one point to another, or it is something that is happening that there is a speed. Kinetic involves the speed. And speed, we cannot make something speed if now we are not talking about something that is taking place from one point to another. There must be a movement. Whether movement of particles or movement of whatever the case it is. But when it involves the kinetics, we mean of the speed. Therefore, we are just talking about the speed of the chemical reactions. Or in other words, we're just talking about chemical kinetics. Now, chemical kinetics involves the speed, involves the start of the rate of chemical reactions. And chemical reaction involves the speed of the reactions. And the speed of the reaction will involve the time that is taken to complete that reactions. So whenever now we are talking about chemical kinetics, we mean of the start of the rate of chemical reactions. So whenever we are just talking about the chemical reaction, we mean of the chemical kinetics. And it is not only the chemical reaction, it is a rate. So chemical kinetics is the study of the rates of chemical reactions. And also the other things is equilibrium. So in this topic, we will be discussing about two things. We'll be discussing about the rate of chemical reactions, and also we'll be discussing about equilibriums. Now, the equilibrium will be considering about the reactants which are found on the other side of the equation and the products which are found on the other side of the equations. So, chemical kinetics is the start of the rate of chemical reactions. Kwa hiyo kujifunza namna reaction inavyochukua muda kukamilika ndivyo tunavyozungumza chemical kinetics. Kwa mfano, labda the reaction is between acid and the base. Maana yake reaction kati ya acid na base inachukua muda gani kuwa completed? Na ule muda ambao inachukua baina ya kila ambacho kimezalishwa au kila ambacho kimetumika, hiyo ndio tunapima rate of chemical reaction. Because the rate of chemical reaction is only measured by considering the reactant that is being used per time and the product that is being formed per time. So in a given time, there is a product which is formed. And in a given time, there is a reactant that is used. So they measure the time that is taken to produce the product, or the time that is taken to use up the reactant. So as we produce the reactant, the product is all about the rate of chemical reaction. And that is why we say the chemical kinetics is the start of the rate of chemical reactions. So we are just studying the rate of chemical reactions. It involves the start of how different conditions influence the speed of a chemical reaction and the process through which the chemical reaction takes place. Kwa hapa tunaangalia zile factors ambazo kwa upande mwingine zinaathiri upatikanaji au upokeaji wa reaction kwa wakati gani. Hizo factors zinaweza kusababisha reaction ichukue muda mrefu zaidi, au factors zile zinaweza kusababisha reaction ichukue muda mfupi zaidi. Kwa zile factors ambazo zinasababisha rate of chemical reaction iwe affected tunaziangalia, lakini vile vile tunaangalia ule muda ambao sasa zile factors ambazo zinasababisha reaction iwe affected pia tunaziangalia. Na ndio maana sasa hapa tumesema it involves the study of how different conditions influence the speed of a chemical reaction and also the process through which the chemical reaction takes place. Example nimechukulia kama reaction kati ya acid na base. Kwa tunapofanya reaction tunachanganya acid na base kwa pamoja, tunategemea matokeo ndani ya muda fulani. Kwa ile reaction inaweza ikachukua muda mrefu zaidi ama ikachukua muda mfupi zaidi kulingana na factors ambazo zinaizunguka hiyo reaction. Kwa reaction lazima tujue ni factors zipi ambazo zinaizunguka ile reaction kiasi kwamba inafika mahala inaathirika, inachukua muda mrefu zaidi ama inachukua muda mfupi zaidi. Na hii ndio sababu unapofanya reaction inabidi ufanye approximation ya muda. Kwamba hii reaction yangu ningependa itumie mwaka mmoja. Kama itumie mwaka mmoja, inabidi niongeze factors zipi ili ili iweze kutimia kwa muda ambao nimeupanga, au nataka itumie siku 2, inabidi nifanye factors zipi ili reaction iweze take place within 2 days, au nifanye vipi mimi ndani ya sekunde 5 au ndani ya dakika 2 niwe nimecomplete ile reaction. Kwa mfano, labda mtu angeweza kupika makande. Kupika makande inaweza ikachukua muda mrefu sana mpaka kuyaivisha, lakini ile tayari ni mfano wa reaction. Kwa inabidi aweke vitu fulani kwenye makande ili haraka yale makande yaweze kuiva kwa wakati ambao yeye amepanga, au kuchemsha maji kwa ajili ya kutengenezea ugali. Sasa anaona labda atachelewa kutengeneza ugali, inabidi afanye vitu fulani ambavyo sasa ni factors ambazo aziweka kwenye ile reaction ili kuhakikisha sasa huu ugali unaiva kwa wakati ambao ameupanga. Na ndio maana kina mama hapa Tanzania utakuta sasa wanaweka labda unga, wakiamini kwamba unga unaharakisha maji yale kuchemka ili waweze kufanya. Hizo zote ni vitu ambavyo tunaita chemical reactions. And then chemical equilibrium. Chemical equilibrium refers to the relative stability of the reactants and the products. Reactants and the products. The reaction between the reactants and the products is considered. Means the balance between the reactants and the products is considered. And this consideration is what we call it chemical equilibrium. Kwa tunapozungumzia chemical equilibrium is all about considering the reactant that is being used and the product that is being used. Are they in the balance state or are they in the state of balance? If they are not in the state of balance, there is a problem somewhere. And then if there is a problem somewhere, we have to do something so as to balance to balance the equilibrium between the reactants and the product. So this is something very important for us to understand, the balance between the reactants and the product. It is something very important. So this is discussed when we are just talking about chemical equilibrium. It refers to the relative stability of the reactants and the product that is formed. Therefore, we have said we are having two things here. We are having the rate of chemical reactions and the chemical equilibriums. Now, for the first time, we are just going to consider the rate of our chemical reactions. When we are just discussing about the rate of chemical reaction, we are just talking about the reactants that is being used at the given time, or the product that is being formed at the given time. So we are just considering the time that is taken to use up the reactants, or the time that is taken to produce the product or to give out the product. Example, I've said, if now you are reacting between the acid and base, we expect salt and water. So the salt and water, these are the products. Once you have reacted between acid and base to produce what we call it salty and water. So this is very important. Therefore, we are looking for the rate of chemical reaction between acid and base. So this is the reactant used up and the time taken to complete that reactants. And then the product that is formed in a given time also indicates the rate of the chemical reaction. And that is why we say the rate at which a chemical reaction takes place is the measure of the progress of the reaction per unit time. Means we are just talking about the progress of the reactions per unit time. And the progress means what? The reactant that have been used or the product that have been produced during the reaction per given time. Because we definitely use time to complete the reactions. And this time may be measured in terms of seconds, minutes, days, hours, and so forth. This can be measured. Therefore, the rate of chemical reaction is the measure of the progress of the reaction per unit time. Kwa ni kipimo cha mwendelezo wa reaction kwa muda ambao imetumia either reactant kuhakikisha imeisha yote au ile product kuhakikisha imetokea yote. Kwa muda ambao umetumika ndio tunaita the rate of chemical reaction. And that is why we say the rate of our chemical reactions is determined by measuring the amount of the reactants that is used up, or measuring the amount of the product that is formed during a given time. So it is all about measuring the product that is formed in a given time, or measuring the reactants, the amount of the reactant that is have been used during the reaction per given time. And that is why we say the rate of the chemical reaction is determined by measuring the amount of the reactants that is used up, or the amount of the product that is formed during a given time. Kwa tunaangalia muda ambao umetumika ku complete reaction. Maana tunaposema complete reaction, kiasi kwamba reactant zikuwa zimetumika zote ndani ya muda fulani, halafu product zikuwa zimetokea zote ndani ya muda fulani. And that is why mathematically can be said a rate of the reaction is equal to amount of the reactant used per time interval, or the amount of the product formed per time interval. So this is how now we can measure the rate of chemical reaction. So the most important thing here to understand is how do we measure the rate of the reaction. So measuring the rate of the reaction, it does not occur only to the product, but it also occurs to the reactants and the product. And that is why the second part of this topic is all about equilibrium. Chemical equilibrium means we are just comparing about two things here. We are just comparing about the reactants, and we are just comparing about the products. And we cannot do so far if now we are having no two things. So this is all about the rate of chemical reaction. So far, now what are the factors that determine the rate of the chemical reaction? Here are they. Now, the factors affecting the rate of the chemical reaction. Now, what are the things which are there? When they happen, it is there. When these things are there, they affect the rate of chemical reaction. And how do they affect it? There is a principle now we can explain. And that's why we are having factors affecting the rate of chemical reaction. Manake, ni mambo gani sasa ambayo yanapelekea ile chemical reaction kuwa affected? Mambo hayo ni mambo manne. Kwanza ni temperature, pili ni concentration, tatu ni surface area, na nne ni catalyst. Hivi ni vitu ambavyo vikiwekwa kwenye chemical reaction lazima viathiri upatikanaji either wa product, ama chochote kile kinaweza ikatokea. Either ile reaction inaweza ikateke muda mrefu zaidi, au reaction inaweza ikateke muda mfupi zaidi. Na lengo la hivi vitu vyote ni muhimu kujifunza. Kama nahitaji kuongeza rate of chemical reaction, ni nini natakiwa kufanya ili ile rate of chemical reaction iweze kuchukua muda mfupi, nahitaji kufanya nini? And that is why we say now we are having the factors affecting the rate of chemical reactions. Kwa hivi ni vitu vinne ambavyo vinaathari katika the rate of chemical reactions. I mean the speed of the rate of chemical reactions. The one is called temperature. And the second one is concentration. The third one is surface area. And the fourth one is catalyst. And whenever you've been told to mention them, you have no limitation that you must start with temperature. No, that is something not important. You must start with anyone. But you have to know the difference between temperature and concentration as they affect the rate of chemical reaction. And the difference between concentration and surface area as well as catalyst as they affect the rate of chemical reaction. These are very important things to understand. So far, now we may start with temperature. The rate of chemical reactions, when now you are just talking about temperature, the rate of chemical reaction increases with the increase in temperature. If now the temperature is increasing, before it was 20 degrees Celsius, now the rate of chemical reaction between the reaction that is happening with temperature of 20 degrees Celsius and the other one with 40 degrees Celsius is quite different. Means that the one which have that high temperature, it is rate of chemical reaction, it will be very higher compared to this one. This means that the rate of chemical reaction increases as we increase the temperature. Now the rate of chemical reaction is so far very high, and it's approximated to be very high at high temperature. This is very important. And that is why we say the rate of a chemical reaction increases with an increase in temperature. Why is it so? The increase in temperature increases the kinetic theory of the particles. Means the vibration of the particles increases as we increase the temperature of the reaction. And so far, by doing so, and that is why we always heat things to make reaction happen in a simple way. Example, if now you are cooking something, you must increase temperature so as to promote the rate of chemical reaction. Kwa hata mtu anayepika, ilikuwa inawezekana labda mahindi kuyafanya mpaka yafike kwenye level ya kwamba sasa yamechemshwa, yamefika kwenye hali ya kulika. Lakini lazima tu apply temperature ili ile reaction sasa iweze kutokea haraka zaidi. Kwa hiyo tungeweza labda kuyaweka hata kwenye kitu fulani, tukayaweka kwenye jua, halafu tukayafunika, tukahakikisha yale mahindi yameiva, lakini yangechukua muda mrefu kiasi kwamba na isingeweza kutokea. Lakini kwa sababu tunahitaji temperature kubwa ili ile reaction iweze take place kwa haraka zaidi, inabidi sasa tuongeze temperature na ndipo tuna apply moto ili kuhakikisha reaction happen. Na ndio maana whenever you are doing the reaction in the laboratory, we are having Bunsen burner, we are having cooking stoves and so forth, so as we may increase the temperature. And once you are increasing the temperature, means you are increasing the rate of the chemical reaction. Means that you will take a short time to complete the reaction. Therefore, you will save time. So, saving time is something very important when you are learning about the rate of chemical reaction. Therefore, the rate of a chemical reaction increases with an increase in temperature simply because temperature increases the kinetic energy. Increases the kinetic energy. It is because vibrations of the particles increases once you are increasing the temperature. Now, once the temperature is increased, vibration of the particles will take place in the massively higher frequency that we expect. Now, the frequency of the vibrations of the particles is approximated to be very higher compared to the one that have got low temperature. Now, once you are increasing the temperature, also you are increasing the rate of chemical reaction. Once you are increasing the temperature, you are increasing the rate of chemical reaction. So far now, let us see graphically how does it represent. Graphically, we can determine the graph between the temperature against the time. Means we are just looking the temperature and the time. Now, temperature is plotted on the y-axis, and this is plotted on the x-axis. Therefore, this is measured in terms of seconds. When you look at this graph, definitely this is an increase in temperature, and this is an increase in time. When you look at these points, at this point, when you need to determine these points, at these points, the time, the temperature, let's say was 10 degrees Celsius, but the time, let's say it is 400 seconds. Now, means that the time is very high compared to the temperature. Means at lower temperature, the time taken to complete the reaction is very longer compared to this one. Let's say it is here now. Let's say this is 50 degrees Celsius. But here definitely you may see the time is reduced from 400, maybe it is 100. This is reduced. Means at this temperature, the time taken to complete the reaction is very small compared to this one. Now the temperature, once the temperature is increasing, now the time taken to complete the reaction is reduced. That is why the rate of the chemical reaction, the speed is increasing. So you cannot increase the speed while you are taking the longer time to complete the reactions. You cannot reduce the rate of the chemical reaction. While to complete it, you are just taking the longer time. Now, the longer the time it is, the rate of the chemical reaction is low. Now, the higher the rate of the chemical reaction is said to be very high, or it is said to be very maximum when the time taken is very minimal to complete that reaction. And that is why, if now you want to reduce the time that is taken to complete the reaction, so as you may increase the rate of chemical reaction, you have to increase temperature. And that is why I have said the temperature increases with the increase of the rate of chemical reaction. That is why the temperature is there to reduce the time taken to complete the reactions. And that is why you can see here also, the temperature is increasing, but the time is reducing. At this time, at this point, the time is reducing, but the temperature is increasing. So we may say this is 80 degrees Celsius, but here it is 50 seconds. So the time is reduced because the temperature is increased. So the increase in temperature increases the rate of the chemical reaction. But doing so, we are increasing the speed of the rate of chemical reaction. And the second factor on which now the rate of chemical reaction depends on is the concentration. Kwa concentration ni muhimu kwenye reactions kwa sababu you may be required to increase the concentration or to reduce the concentration. So far you are looking for the rate of the chemical reaction, whether you want to increase it or you want to reduce it. But how does it affect it? Here it is. Increasing the concentration of the one reactant increases the rate of the chemical reactions. Kwa hiyo ukiongeza concentration, na kuongeza concentration ni kuongeza kitu kwenye reaction. Kwa mfano, the reaction is between acid and base, as I've taken an example, to produce what we call it salt and water. This, once you increase acid, you are increasing the concentration of the reactants. Once you have increased base, you are increasing the concentration of the reactants. Once you are increasing the salts, you are increasing the concentration of the product. So far, increasing the concentration of the reactants, like you are increasing the vibration and you are increasing the collisions of the particles because you are just increasing the number of the particles within the limited volume. So if now you are increasing the number of the particles within the limited volume, means that you are increasing the collisions of the particles because they are incorporated in a single volume. And that is why we say increasing the concentration of the one reactants increases the rate of the chemical reaction. This is to say, increasing the concentration increases the reactant particles colliding to form product. This is because more particles per unit volume of the reaction mixture. Now, in the mixture, you have increased more particles. Kwa kama nimeongeza particles nyingi kwenye mixtures, maanake uhusiano wa kukutana hizi particles na kufanya collision unaongezeka kwa sababu wamekuwa wengi. Like sisi tungelikuwepo darasani wachache, tunapokuwepo darasani wanafunzi wachache, tunakuwa mgongano wa mwanafunzi na mwanafunzi ni kidogo sana kwa sababu tuko mbali mbali. Lakini kama tutaongeza concentration, tutaongeza idadi ya wanafunzi ndani ya darasa, maana yake mgusano baina ya mwanafunzi na mwanafunzi ni mkubwa zaidi kwa sababu tuko wengi ndani ya sehemu moja. Maana yake nikigeuka hivi na mgusa mwenzangu, nikigeuka hivi na mgusa mwenzangu, kwa sababu tuko wengi ndani ya volume moja. Kwa maana hiyo hasa hapa tunasema kwamba tunapoongeza concentration, tunaongeza reactant particles ambazo zinaongeza colliding to form product. Kwa hiyo muunganiko unakuwa ni haraka zaidi kuliko zingelikuwepo mbalimbali zinaanza kutafutana zile particles mpaka mpate mwenzake pale, nyingine si iko pale, nyingine iko pale, nyingine iko pale. Maana yake zinaanza kutafutana mpaka zikapatane, halafu ziungane zitengeneze product. Inachukua muda, na ikichukua muda maana yake sasa rate of reaction inakuwa ni ndogo, inakuwa ni very slow. Kwa hiyo sasa ili tuongeze rate of chemical reaction lazima tuongeze concentration ili collision sasa iongezeke, na ikiongezeka collision inachukua muda mfupi sasa kupata matokeo ambayo tunayataka, ambayo ndio tunaita products. And graphically can be represented in this way. Kwa hiyo kigrafu tunaweza tukaionyesha hivi. Kadri volume inavyoongezeka, muda na wenyewe uko hapa. Muda unaongezeka kwa size hii, volume inaongezeka kwa size hii. Ukiangalia hapa, muda ni mkubwa au ni mrefu zaidi, lakini volume ilikuwa kidogo. Kwa hiyo kumbe nikiongeza, nikija comparison ya hii point hapa hivi, utaona muda umepungua ambao ningetumia labda sekunde 10, halafu ndani ya volume labda 80 cm3. Lakini before 10 cm3, maana yake sasa hawa jamaa concentration yao ilikuwa ndogo, lakini hapa sasa unaangalia walichukua muda mrefu zaidi ku complete ile reaction, approximately 50 seconds. Kwa maana hiyo, the longer the time, the higher the volume, the shorter the time. But the less the volume, the higher the time that is taken to complete the reaction. Now, so far, in short, concentration increases the rate of the chemical reaction. So far, if now you are increasing the concentration of the reactants, likelihood you are increasing the rate of the chemical reaction. So far you are increasing the colliding process of the reactants to happen in a single volume that was approximated to be there. So it is very important. And then next factors is right here. We have the third factor on which now the rate of the chemical reaction depends on. Now, the third one is called the surface area. It is called the surface area. And the first one is called catalyst. The surface area, the greater the surface area that is in contact, the higher the rate of the reactions. If now the surface area that is in contact with the reactions, that surface area, as you keep on increasing, you are increasing the rate of the chemical reactions. But the first factor is that catalyst. It's called catalyst. Catalyst is a substance that is there to speed up the rate of chemical reactions. But there is no change that is made by the presence of the catalyst. So catalyst is the substance that is added into the reaction so as to speed up the rate of chemical reaction. Kwa ni vitu ambavyo vinaongezwa kwenye reaction ili kuhakikisha sasa tunaongeza speed ya chemical reactions. Na hii ni muhimu kuelewa. Haibadilishi chochote kwenye reaction. Kwa kama reaction chemical ilikuwa inatakiwa ipatikane salt and water, lakini tumeongeza catalyst to speed up the rate of chemical reaction. At the end of the reaction, we only expect water and salt because there is no chemical change that is made by the catalyst. Kwa catalyst haibadilishi chemical product that is it chemically the product ambayo inakuwa formed. And that's why we say a catalyst is a substance that speed up the rate of chemical reactions but remains chemically unchanged at the end of the reactions. Example, if now you are doing the reaction, then you decide to add manganese oxide. This is only the catalyst, and it will be there only to speed up the rate of chemical reaction, but it won't change the product that was supposed to be formed. Now, the product that is formed remains chemically. Chemical remains the same, there is no changes. But this only affected the physical change. It only affected the physical state of the reactions, but it does not change the chemical state of the reaction. Now, the catalyst is the substance which speeds up the rate of the chemical reaction. Therefore, by concluding about the factors, we have said we are having temperature. Temperature, as we have said, as now you keep on increasing the temperature, you are increasing the rate of the chemical reaction. Or in other words, we are saying rate of chemical reactions. Rate of chemical reactions. Rate of chemical reactions is that proportional to the temperature. Means if now you keep on increasing the temperature, you are increasing the rate of the chemical reactions. But on the second factor we have said, it is called concentration. Now also, concentration is very important to be considered. Means once you are increasing the concentration, also you are definitely increasing the rate of the chemical reactions. Now they are direct proportion to each other. That is why you say concentration increases with the increase of the rate of chemical reaction. Or in other words, we say rate of chemical reaction increases with the increase in concentrations of one of the reactants. But of the third one, we have said it is what we call it surface area. Surface area also is something very important. We have said as the greater the surface area, the higher the rate of the chemical reaction. And lastly, we have discussed is what we call it catalyst. Now, the catalyst is the substance that is added into the reaction so as to speed up the rate of the chemical reaction. Now, once you are increasing the catalyst in the reaction, you are so far increasing the rate of the chemical reaction. So these are the four factors on which now the rate of the chemical reaction depends. Kwa hiyo chemical reaction inategemea hivi vitu vinne. Na kama kimoja wapo kinabadilika, kama aidha unahitaji matokeo mazuri, inabidi uangalie ni factor hivi sasa niongeze kwenye reaction yangu ili sasa nihitaji kile ambacho nakihitaji. Now next time we're going to discuss about the other things, but now this is the end of the discussion.